Need your daily fix on mixed martial arts?
We're going to kind of recap Bellator 155 from UFC 198.
Who's who?
Kind of a controversial decision.
And who's not.
I couldn't figure out why, and then it hit me.
Well, don't you fret, because Golden State Media Concepts got you covered. Get your daily dose of MMA podcasts. Everything from the UFC, Bellator Fighting Championship, Extreme Cage Fighting, Invicta Fighting Championship, and so much more. Join us as we talk about some of the biggest names in mixed martial arts. We've got you covered here on Golden State Media Concepts MMA Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC MMA podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Arnel De Leon, and hopefully you are doing well for yourself. You, your friends, your family, whether you live in the States or internationally, I hope you're doing well for yourself and you're surviving. You're surviving with all of us in the year of 2020. Yikes. I recently just went to an Asian Vietnamese restaurant to go get a sandwich, and the person right in front of me, they ordered a sandwich, and that sandwich read up at exactly I think that guy spent like $40. He bought a sandwich or two for like him and his girlfriend, and then like his return was 2020, and immediately everyone looked at this guy. Cashier looked at the guy, his girlfriend looked at the guy, everyone's looking at the guy, and he says, "Oh, 2020, I know, right? Yikes!" And everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, this is awful, ain't it?" So it was so coincidental that, what are the chances? What are the chances of you buying something and all of a sudden you get the exact year, you get the exact refund? It's very bizarre. Very, very bizarre. But, another thing that is really bizarre right now is UFC Fight Island. There's a lot of comparisons to Mortal Kombat or some old 90s action movie. I think like Bloodsport, the Jean-Claude Van Damme movie, where it's a group of fighters all summoned together to some like mystical, magical foreign island that nobody has heard of. Well, people have heard of Yas Island, but for the most part, people in America don't know Yas Island. So, UFC 251 took place at Yas Island at Abu Dhabi, and when I watched the show, it was a great show overall. Honestly, from top to bottom, it was a really fun show. We had some really good performance here. Obviously, submission of the night goes towards Amanda Ribas. Performance of the night, in my opinion, my personal viewpoint opinion here, goes towards Rose Namajunas. I thought she had the best 2 rounds in any fighter considering the fact that Rose Namajunas has been gone for about a year and a half. She made the big comeback here, and she looked really great. She looked just like, how Rose Namajunas was 2 years ago. So I'm excited about, how good Rose Namajunas did. I'm excited for her. We could potentially see another fight year candidate as Weili Zhang is throwing out Rose Namajunas' name out there. So we could see Weili Zhang against Rose Namajunas, possibly. Or we might see Rose Namajunas against Joanna Jędrzejczyk for the 3rd time. That would be really fun also. So overall, I'm actually really excited for the future for Rose Namajunas, for Amanda Ribas, for Petyr Yan also. Petyr Yan became a bantamweight champion at the age of 27 years old. Congratulations, good for you. He defeated a really game Jose Aldo. I'll talk about Alexander Volkanovski versus Max Holloway later in today's podcast, because that in itself needs a dissection. That needs time and effort for me to really think about and analyze, like, oh man, like that fight. Ugh. But let's go with the main event right here. Main event being Jorge Masvidal replacing Gilbert Burns. He had about 8 days notice in his prep time to go fight against Kumaru Usman for the welterweight championship. This fight had a whole lot of hype. Not only, I remember Dana White saying that this Fight Island event had just as much, if not more hype than the Conor McGregor against Khabib Nurmagomedov. And I don't think that mostly, Jorge Masvidal definitely brings in 6 figures in terms of pay-per-view revenue and pay-per-view sales. Most of the Fight Island gimmick is like so interesting. I got friends who don't watch mixed martial arts, who don't watch UFC, and they find the Fight Island, Fight Island thumbnail videos popping up into the YouTube recommended. And so apparently there are a lot of people watching the Fight Island stuff, or they're typing about Fight Island, or they're making Fight Island videos. And so Kumaru Usman versus Jorge Masvidal. I thought Gilbert Burns would be a better matchup for Kumaru Usman. I really do think so, because those fighters, the both of them fight very similarly. I give a slight edge towards the striking towards Gilbert Burns, while I give a slight edge on the wrestling with Kumaru Usman. But Jorge Masvidal versus Kumaru Usman, this was pretty much a one-sided battle, the traditional sense of who would win a fight, a wrestler or a striker. And in most cases, the wrestler always defeats the striker. And that practically happened here. With the exception of the first round, Kumaru Usman pretty much controlled Jorge Masvidal through all 5 rounds of action. To be honest with you, it got really boring. Going to the first round here, Jorge Masvidal, he did a really good job. He did a really awesome job defending the takedown. And actually, through all 5 rounds, he did a really good job defending the takedown. It is for the most parts, Kumaru Usman was mostly clinching and grappling with him onto the cage and putting some weight onto the cage and winning through clinching and dirty boxing. That's how Kumaru Usman got it. He did get some takedowns later on throughout the fight, but for the most part, Jorge Masvidal did a really awesome job defending the takedown. He just couldn't really defend the clinching and the power of Usman, and Jorge Masvidal just couldn't handle the pressure that Kumaru Usman was providing him because every single round this fight, it was never Jorge Masvidal dictating the pace of the fight. It was the bell rings, Kumaru Usman starts pressuring forward. I don't remember an instance to which Kumaru Usman was backing away. This was a 25-minute fight. All those 25 minutes, maybe there was a minute of Kumaru Usman walking backwards, or maybe 30 seconds. But for over 20 minutes of the 25-minute fight, it was mostly Kumaru Usman going in, shooting down for a double leg takedown. Jorge Masvidal preventing himself from getting taken down, but he's being pressed up onto the cage. And then Kumaru Usman is slowly, he's doing everything. He's stomping on Jorge Masvidal's legs. He's punching him in the ribs. He's going for knee strikes onto the body. He's going for dirty boxing. He's going for right hooks into the clinch. Pretty much Kumaru Usman fought this fight exactly how he should have. And that's a good thing. I was really afraid that after Kumaru Usman's and Colby Covington's performance when they fought each other, a lot of people were saying oh my gosh, wow, good job for Kumaru Usman, man. His striking was really great, and Kumaru Usman's striking is really good. But in the Usman versus Colby Covington fights, that really was 2 B+ B level strikers in the UFC with A+ wrestling doing a striking match, and now we have a B+ striker / A+ wrestler in Kumaru Usman fighting against an A+ striker with a C+ B- grappling in Jorge Masvidal. So I wasn't really all that impressed by Kumaru Usman's striking game. I genuinely believed that after Kumaru Usman's recent fights, his coach would do that thing that every coach should stop doing with their wrestlers and be like, oh man, dude, your striking is A. It's amazing. It's perfect, man. Try to knock him out. Which I hate that. I hate it. I hate it when wrestlers attempt to be strikers when they are not good enough to be strikers. And for Kumaru Usman's case, he's humble enough and he recognizes, okay, I know I'm a good striker, but I definitely know I'm going to lose in the striking exchanges against Jorge Masvidal. And he was right. Early in the first round, Jorge Masvidal was winning in the striking exchanges. I think there was a minute period between Jorge Masvidal and Kumaru Usman where they're trying to trade shots. It was really obvious and evident that Jorge Masvidal was just a better striker. He was landing more cleaner shots. Also, he had a larger reach, and his form looked a lot more better. Because for Kumaru Usman, he throws jabs, but he throws these very short jabs with a slight bend in his elbow. And so it's weird. It's he throws these jabs that don't really have that much torque in them, and it's very easy to read. And if you know how to parry those shots, it's very easy for the fighter. So for Jorge Masvidal, he's seeing all these shots come in. He's ducking, he's evading, he's parrying, and he's landing all these really good hooks and jabs onto Kumaru Usman. Then Kumaru Usman, after 1 minute in the first round, was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to wrestle you now, okay? I'm going to wrestle you. No striking. Alright? I know I'm not good enough to outstrike you, so I'm just going to go grapple you. And here's the thing. Jorge Masvidal won the first round. No doubt in my mind. Jorge Masvidal, he defended the takedown, and he was able to get away from the clinches of Kumaru Usman in the first round. Now, Jorge Masvidal couldn't do this consistently through all 5 rounds, but first round, Jorge Masvidal, he won the round there, so good for him. And then we moved towards the second round, pretty much the same thing. Well, here's the thing. Every round, pretty much to an extent, was the same. And when I say to an extent it's the same, it's Kumaru Usman pressuring up onto Jorge Masvidal. Kumaru Usman's strategy every single round was the exact same. Kumaru Usman didn't at all change his fighting style or his game plan through every single round. Even though he lost the first round, he implemented the exact same strategy coming in from the first round towards second, third, fourth, and fifth round. Which leads to, it becomes a battle cardio, a battle of durability, of how long can you sustain this much pressure. And for Jorge Masvidal, he was able to sustain it in the first round. He was able to sustain it for about at the very most like 2 minutes in the second round. But from that point on, it just didn't turn out well for Jorge Masvidal here. I'm gonna try to pull up the fight stats here, but for the most part in this fight, even Kumaru Usman, when he fought against Jorge Masvidal, his striking numbers and striking like statistics started becoming a little bit more closer here. He actually outstriked. Here's the weird thing: Kumaru Usman outstriked Jorge Masvidal. We got here. Kumaru Usman has 0 takedowns. He landed 77% of his total strikes. 263 total strikes out of 341. He landed 94 out of 151 signaling strikes. And here's the crazy part. Kumaru Usman, he attempted 16 takedowns. 16. He only nailed 5 out of the 16 takedowns, but he pressured Jorge Masvidal so much in those takedown attempts that there's no way Masvidal could consistently defend these takedowns. Once again, good job for Jorge Masvidal, man. Your takedown defense was awesome. It looked really good, but it just wasn't good enough. Now, compare the total strikes now with Jorge Masvidal. Jorge Masvidal landed 88 out of 157 strikes. 56%. Here's the thing. 56%? That's incredibly good. That's really good. It is the end of the wrestlers took over. In terms of significant strikes, Jorge Masvidal landed 66 out of 125 signaling strikes, 52%. Then he had 0 takedowns, 0 submission attempts. When I look at this matchup here, Kumaru Usman had a perfect game plan. Don't let the numbers fool you, though. So I'm afraid someone was going to read the numbers and be like, wow, he was able to outstrike Jorge Masvidal. And yes, he was able to outstrike Jorge Masvidal after Jorge Masvidal was landing really good shots in the first and second round. Because from that point on, Jorge Masvidal was so worried and was so careful about trying to go and avoid the takedown that he started walking backwards. Because I guess his idea was, if Kumaru Usman shoots for a takedown, you go move back and maybe you might score like an uppercut on him as he's attempting a takedown. That's my guess. Or he was going to go and, or Jorge Masvidal was also kind of using the cage to go defend the takedown, which works as a double-edged sword, because yes, he is able to prevent the takedown from, having his back on the cage, but that doesn't stop Kumaru Usman from pressuring him inside. And Kumaru Usman, here's something else. Kumaru Usman fights better than Jorge Masvidal when it comes to fighting inside the pocket. Fighting mid and outside the pocket, Jorge Masvidal, without a doubt. Fighting inside the pocket, Kumaru Usman. Kumaru Usman has really short, stubby arms. He has really short, stubby arms, so he can pull out those really short hooks and really short jabs that are really great. Now, one thing that was definitely eye-opening for me in this fight was the fact that whenever Kumaru Usman attempted, by the third round, whenever Kumaru Usman attempted a takedown or was attempting a clinch, he would lean in head first. Michael Bisping talked about it. He was like, okay, why is Kumaru Usman leaning in with his chin when he's attempting a takedown by the third round? Because he started doing this thing multiple times through fourth and fifth round, but it was very evident. In the first and second round, whenever he attempted a takedown, his chin was tucked, and he was going shoulder first onto his opponents. Compare that to the third, fourth, and fifth round, where Kumaru Usman started just grappling Jorge Masvidal with his chin going forward while both of his arms are a wee bit down. And I thought to myself, if Jorge Masvidal can spot that, if he can spot those openings, he could have got knocked down. But by the time Jorge Masvidal was able to recognize that Kumaru Usman's opening is him in the third round with his chin leaning forward as he attempts a clinch or a takedown, well, that's a good time to do a knockout. But Jorge Masvidal was super gassed. He was very tired. And overall, it was a great showing by both fighters. Even though Jorge Masvidal is a very popular fighter here, and a lot of people just didn't like the fight, I'll be honest with you, I got really bored watching the fight. A lot of people on Twitter were talking about how boring the fight was. It was a good performance. It really was. It was objectively a strong performance of Kumaru Usman. He fought the right way. Jorge Masvidal did the best he could do with the 8-day prep time he had, and fighting somebody as game and as good as a grappler who is, who fights the exact opposite as Jorge. He fought the best he could against him. He really did. But yeah, overall, this fight really was boring. I recommend you guys watch the first and second round. Yeah, first 1 through 3, then fourth and fifth round pretty much is it's the same thing. It kind of is a cycle. Michael Bisping said it was boring. I thought it was a pretty boring fight. A lot of people on Twitter were really angry about it. They were really upset. Even when I look at the YouTube comments, or during the post-fight press conference, where it's live on YouTube, you guys can go watch it whenever, after a post UFC event happens. You will see a chat on the right side. And the chat, whenever Kumaru Usman came on, was like, oh man, dude, Usman, it was a boring fight, man. That was a boring main event. But when Jorge Masvidal came up, the people in the chat, they loved him. They're like, hey man, you did your best, dude. You did your best fighting against a guy who doesn't want to fight fun. Because Jorge Masvidal, he fights fun. And I like seeing fighters like Jorge. Jorge Masvidal fought the best he could. Kumaru Usman fought the right way. There was no other way he should have fought that fight. He fought exactly the right way, how it should be. And Kumaru Usman proves why he was the betting odds favorite in that fight. So you're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast. Come back after the break here, talking about UFC 251. After the short break, see you later.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And we are back. So I am discussing UFC 251. It was a great card from top to bottom here. Main event was kind of boring, but to be honest with you, both fighters fought exactly the right way. I remember a tweet that came out right before Jorge Masvidal and Kumaru Usman started, where some guy says, or like somebody on Twitter saying, I just betted $200,000 for Jorge Masvidal to win the fights. And now I both kind of feel sad for the guy for losing $200,000, but also not really, because if you have $200,000 saved up and you can just recklessly go and just spend it on a fight, then damn dude, you are loaded and you have a whole lot of money. You have a whole lot of money. This is being reported in by MMAJunkie.com here that Jorge Masvidal thanks supporters after UFC 51 reportedly rakes in 1.3 million pay-per-view buys. UFC President Dana White apparently wasn't kidding when he said prior to UFC 51 that the event was trending to draw major numbers. According to a report by The Athletic, Saturday's event headlined by Kumaru Usman and Jorge Masvidal raked in approximately 1.3 million pay-per-view buys. Shortly after it surfaced, Jorge Masvidal took to Twitter to acknowledge the news and thanks his fans and haters for their support. He goes on to say, the overwhelming amount of support I had received before, during, after this journey has been humbling, Masvidal wrote. Still got a lot of goals to meet. All you that tuned to see me win, thank you. All to see me to lose, thank you. The estimated 1.3 million buys is the most the promotion has drawn for a single event since UFC 229 back in October of 2018. Also remember Dana White said that the organization has raked in more merchandise money in the year of 2020 than they did in the year of 2019. So right now, 2020, strangely enough, has been really good for the UFC. That event was headlined 229 with Khabib Nurmagomedov against Conor McGregor. 3 title fights were on Saturday's billing: Usman versus Masvidal, Alexander Volkanovski versus Max Holloway, and Petyr Yan versus Jose Aldo. The fight was really fun. It was really enjoyable, and I think there was a lot of people talking about. It's so strange because Conor McGregor, he's retired. And there was speculation going on, like, oh man, what's the UFC going to do? Like, their golden boy, Conor McGregor, he's gone from the fight game. How will they be able to make money? And so, the fact that the UFC was able to make a lot more money with Conor McGregor not there, that just speaks volume of how confident Dana White and the UFC organization is in pushing new stars and being able to, continue having these successful shows. But let's talk about what's coming up next here in the welterweight division here. Gilbert Burns, obviously, is next. I just recently watched the post-fight press conference here. I rewatched the Holloway Volkanovski fight, because I really needed to see like who really won that fight. But in the post-fight press conference here, Dana White was asked like, "Hey, what's next for Kumaru Usman here?" And I remember Michael Bisping said, "The only person who can defeat Kumaru Usman has to be a fighter who has all the tools, has all the skills, and is a complete fighter here." I compare Kumaru Usman's reign right now as welterweight champion to that of Khabib, in that Khabib, he's this grappler guy, he's this wrestler, but for some reason he's being matched up with all these strikers. And so that's why Khabib is always winning his fights. I'd love to see Khabib fight against another grappler. I think if we had a grappler versus grappler fight, that would be very interesting, at least for me. And it would be a lot more balanced. For Gilbert Burns, he's more than just a grappler. He came into the UFC initially as just primarily a jiu-jitsu guy, clinch guy, wrestler. And then as time went on, Gilbert Burns moved up one weight class. He moved up 2 welterweights, packed in some muscle mass, and now the guy is knocking people out. Like, he just TKO'd Damian Maia. Although Damian Maia, like, of course, like, he's not really the hardest iron jaw guy there, but he was able to go and outstrike Tyron Woodley. He was able to outstrike Gunnar Nelson. He was able to outstrike Damian Maia. Gilbert Burns, he's got everything. When I look at Gilbert Burns versus Kumaru Usman, Dana White said himself, he feels like Gilbert Burns, stylistically, has the best chance of defeating Kumaru Usman. Also, Colby Covington, but like Colby Covington's strategy was very weird. The fight between Usman and Covington, that was a very bizarre fight for me, personally, at the very least, though. But we got Gilbert Burns matching up against Kumaru Usman. Dana White says Burns is the next fighter, and although Gilbert Burns isn't the most popular fighter out there in the world, Burns versus Usman, I really believe that Usman versus Gilbert Burns will be a better fight than the Masvidal Usman fight. That's what I believe. I believe that matchup just makes a lot more sense to me. Because how can Kumaru Usman defeat Burns, and how can Burns defeat Kumaru Usman? Let's think about this. All right, then Kumaru Usman, at least in my, I don't know how to think about this. Who is the better striker, Usman or Gilbert Burns? The numbers say Usman, but if you just check the eye test, I just feel like Gilbert Burns is a lot more better striker. He's a lot more accurate in his striking. Oh, it's Usman, 70% striking accuracy. I got him. But Usman's strikes mostly come from the clinch, from fighting inside the clinch or fighting inside the pockets. Kumaru Usman's jab game, or trying to fight outside the pockets, his mid-range fighting in the pockets is pretty much non-existent, to be honest with you. And when you're fighting Kumaru Usman outside of his pockets, then he's very uncomfortable. He can't really do that much. To be honest with you, he's pretty much a non-threat fighting outside the pocket. When he's in the mid pocket, within boxing distance, within boxing range, he doesn't really do anything. He immediately shoots in for a double or a single leg takedown. His mid-range fighting doesn't really exist. But in the close range, man, Usman, he's a warrior, man. He's a beast warrior. And that's why the matchup with him and Gilbert Burns makes so much sense. Because Burns, he is a lot more better fighting outside the pocket. He's a lot more better fighting within the mid of the pocket. And here's the thing, Burns came into the organization as a guy who's he wants, like Gilbert Burns, like 2-3 years ago, he would fight like Kumaru Usman. And that he would press for the action, go for some uppercuts inside the pocket, inside the clinch, within just inches away from his opponent, and then go for a takedown, or press him up onto the cage. Burns, coming to the UFC, fights like Usman, so he knows how to handle a fighter like Kumaru Usman. Now, the wrestling game. Gilbert Burns, to me, has the striking game. Has a striking game outside and mid the pockets. And Kumaru Usman, Gilbert Burns, when they're fighting inside the pocket and clinching, that can be anyone's game, but because Gilbert Burns is more of a dynamic striker, I think Gilbert Burns has really underrated leg kicks. I'll just put it out there. Gilbert Burns has really good underrated leg kicks that nobody really mentions all that much. Kumaru Usman, he throws leg kicks also, but I feel like he's just throwing them for the sake of necessity. I don't really feel like a fighter should be threatened off Kumaru Usman's leg kicks here. But when it comes to the wrestling and the grappling here, that's going to be very interesting here. That'll be very interesting. Once again, it's tough to judge how good of a grappler Gilbert Burns is at the highest level, considering that he out-wrestled Tyron Woodley. And although Tyron Woodley's resume says that, Tyron Woodley, man, he's the best ever. He's one of the best ever. He's one of the all-time greats in the welterweight division. The guy is jacked, great wrestler, power puncher. There's no weaknesses to Tyron Woodley's game. The only weakness Tyron Woodley has is his own motivation to fight. That's really about it. But Gilbert Burns, man, he wrestled Tyron Woodley a lot more better than Kumaru Usman wrestled Tyron Woodley. Because when I look at how both of them wrestled Woodley just felt unmotivated to be there when he fought against Usman. Woodley felt more motivated in his fight against Gilbert Burns. But even then, Gilbert Burns was able to out-wrestle Woodley. And was able to also pressure Woodley, who has to be like one of the most powerful strikers in all the UFC when it comes to fighting somebody in the mid or inside game of the pocket. So, Burns, in my opinion, had a better performance against Woodley than Kumaru Usman when he dethroned Woodley for the welterweight belt. So, in terms of wrestling here, I'm kind of throwing it up in the air. I'm not really sure of Usman's jiu-jitsu game, to be honest with you. Burns has the wrestling and the jiu-jitsu game compared to Usman, who's just primarily wrestling. That's a really close one here. Once again, I always bet on who I believe is the safe pick, in my viewpoint. So I will say Kumaru Usman is the favorite to defeat Gilbert Burns. Coming into the Fight Island events, the betting odds of the betting favorites was towards Kumaru Usman, but not by that much. Really not, because both of them stylistically match up with each other perfectly. They can both strike. They can both wrestle. Gilbert Burns just has a lot more options than Kumaru Usman, but Usman is that good in the wrestling that I don't know if it's worth implementing in how good of a striker Burns is. But Burns, he can also grapple. He can also pull out submissions from the bottom. He can handle himself from the bottom. He can handle himself from the top. So Gilbert Burns versus Kumaru Usman, I'm excited for that matchup. When it does happen, I'm all for it. I'm going to be betting on the safe pick of Kumaru Usman being the guy who's going to go in and win the fight. But when will that fight happen? I'm not really sure. Gilbert Burns was tested for COVID. We're unsure what his current status is right now. Not only that, there were other people who were also tested positive for COVID. I know Paul Felder. Paul Felder was sitting next to a guy who had COVID on the plane ride, and so he was then quarantined. So Paul Felder, which sucks because I think 2 weeks ago he was talking about, oh man, it's so stressful. Fight Island is very stressful for me because I gotta go look up all the information. I gotta study all the fighters, from the top fighters to the bottom card to the prelim guys. He has to study. He has to do all these studying, and he's going on Twitter about it, where he's talking about how difficult it is to study for these fights. And then Paul Felder, I just looked it up on Twitter, where it's an image of him like at his hotel room, being like, "I'm not gonna make it." So I'm unhappy for Paul Felder for not being able to make a show. You hate seeing stuff happen. First, the UFC has to think, all right, is it right for Gilbert Burns to fight against Tyron Woodley, considering the fact that Gilbert Burns just got COVID? I'm pretty sure he's healthy right now, but we got all the rumors going down. There's a second wave happening, and here's one thing UFC has to keep in mind: Khabib's father, Khabib's dad, he had COVID. Now he had COVID, and it was reported by Khabib himself and from other sources that his father was COVID-free. He was fine. He was clear. He was just placed out of coma. Now, obviously, him being being 58 years old, much older than Gilbert Burns. But even then, even after, going through the process and being healed up from the COVID issue, that doesn't clear you from being 100% healthy or 100% safe. Right now, we don't know what's going on with Jacare Ronaldo Souza. Jacare was tested, and it turns out that he was diagnosed with COVID. He was supposed to fight somebody. Things are turning out well for him. And so now we don't know what the status is for Jacare Ronaldo Souza. And now for Gilbert Burns, he currently lives in Florida right now. In Florida, if you guys haven't been checking up on the news that's happening in Florida, yikes. I think right now Florida has to be like one of the top three most infected areas of COVID in America. Which is so bizarre, because just last month, there were news feeds and people putting on Twitter, a lot of stuff on YouTube, where you see a lot of these dudes with no shirts going to the Miami beaches, being like, "Hey man, YOLO, you only live once. I don't care if I have COVID." Apparently, it's also reported on the news that there was this fraternity party that happened, and they were throwing a party, and somebody made a joke. They're like, "Hey man, first person to get COVID in this party, he gets a free beer, yeah!" And it's in Florida. Gilbert Burns lives in Florida. Florida is where the UFC had their comeback shows. It's where they're having the WWE shows. All right, then Florida is where all the NBA players who are traveling all across states they're the ones who are going to the bubble in Orlando, Florida to go play basketball for Mickey Mouse. So right now, Florida, that place is a hotbed of so many athletic people, so many talents, people traveling inside to the state of Florida. Things are getting a lot worse. Death rates are going up. Cases of COVID is going up. Things are not turning out well for people who live in Florida. And I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what the process is, especially for the NBA, for the National Basketball Association, a much, much more larger organization than the UFC. They're going to be having their basketball events happen July 28th, July 30th is when they're going to go bring back basketball. And so they're going to have 20 teams. Each team has around 12 people. You got to think about their managers. You got to think about the coaching. You got to think about the trainers and stuff. There's a lot of people coming to Florida soon. A lot of famous celebrities, a lot of millionaires, a lot of money is on the line coming up for the basketball events happening in Orlando, Florida. So if things don't turn out well from those basketball events, and considering the fact that UFC has had events happening in the Florida area, and Florida area cases are rising up, I don't know. I legitimately don't know when we can expel Gilbert Burns. To be honest with you, how close we are to Gilbert Burns versus Kumaru Usman really does depend on what happens to the state of Florida in the next month. Are things going to be good? Are the basketball games going to go smoothly? Are the WWE events, are they going to go smoothly? Considering the fact there's a lot of people being infected right now in the WWE's Performance Center. There are pro wrestling shows happening at AEW. We got people traveling in. We got a lot of millionaires and billionaires traveling to Florida. We got a lot of elderly people traveling to Florida. Yikes. If you live in Florida, man, I'm sorry for you. I really am. But let's cross our fingers and hopefully things will go well over there. So you're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast. Coming back right after the short break here. See you soon.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play. This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And we are back. So we are discussing UFC 251. Kumaru Usman was able to defend his welterweight title against Jorge Masvidal. But what about the co-main event, which was Max Holloway versus Alexander Volkanovski for the UFC featherweight title? This was a very controversial fight, and we got some people saying Max Holloway should have won the fight. We got a lot of people saying Alexander Volkanovski should have won the fight. What really happened? Well, Volkanovski was able to defeat Max Holloway and win via split decision. Now, was this the right choice? Well, let's talk about the fight here. Let's talk about the fight, and let's see if it was the right choice. It could have honestly gone either way. First round, Volkanovski versus Max Holloway. A lot of people picked Holloway winning the first round. A lot of people picked Holloway winning the first round, and when I look at it, I watched it twice. I watched it the day of, and I watched it just a couple hours ago, relooking at the fight, because there was a lot of people saying, oh man, the fight was rigged, Max Holloway was robbed, that was some bad officiating, that was some bad judging. And I told myself, you know what? Let's look at the stats, and let's look at the eye test here, because you got to differentiate the stats and also what you just see in the fights. For instance, when you look at Cody Garbrandt versus Dominic Cruz, the stats say Dominic Cruz won the fight. But just off the eye test, Cody Garbrandt won. But in the first round here, I'll bring the stats here. Max Holloway landed 19 of 40 significant strikes. Alexander Volkanovski landed 27 of 56 strikes. Holloway, 47%. Alexander Volkanovski, 48%. So, right, striking percentages, they're about the same. Volkanovski gets about 8 more shots in. But here's the interesting part. Max Holloway was able to get a knockdown on Volkanovski. Not only that, even though he got the knockdown, when I look at the fight here, Volkanovski was able to chop Max Holloway. He was able to chop his legs. He was able to get Max Holloway's legs swelling up pretty early on. And Volkanovski was the one who was initiating the fights. Max Holloway was moving around the octagon, being a counterfighter for the most parts. But when it came to Alexander Volkanovski versus Max Holloway, it was Alexander chasing Holloway, stopping him with leg kicks. Alexander Volkanovski pressuring Holloway, but Holloway being able to go get some good, nice counter punches. But even then, were the counter punches enough over Volkanovski's sheer volume of strikes? Volkanovski attempted 16 more strikes. He landed 8 more strikes than Max Holloway. And then Holloway, there was one good part here. He had one good knockdown on Volkanovski within the last 12 seconds of the fights, of the first round. And because of that knockdown, I think a lot of people picked Holloway winning the first round. Because it shows in the bottom left, when you're watching the show, the Twitter feed, where you got people like Cody Garbrandt, Aljamain Sterling, and other people. They're all saying, oh, Max Holloway won that 1-0. When I saw that first time, the knockdown, I thought, okay, Holloway won the fight. His counterpunches were good. Like, he fought defensively and was able to go and, stop Alexander Volkanovski in his pressuring. And then look at the numbers. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, why did it look like Holloway was winning that fight, even though Volkanovski was objectively doing better in the second time I watched it? Because in the second time I watched Volkanovski in that first round, Volkanovski, he's not landing any combos. And that's the tipping point of the entire fight, its entirety here. Volkanovski was landing very few to little combos. Holloway, in all of the exchanges, was landing combos. Volkanovski, despite the size difference, being the much shorter fighter, was able to pressure Holloway and got like a leg kick in. He got strike in, comes away, gets a body shot. The way how every round set up, it was pretty much Volkanovski pressuring Holloway. Then within the span of 2 minutes, Volkanovski would have thrown 3 leg kicks, 4 body punches, and like 2 jabs to the face. And that's over the course of 2 minutes. Meanwhile, Max Holloway, within the course of 2 minutes, would attempt 2 combos. He'll try to go for a 1-2 on the head, and then he'll try to go for a leg kick to like 2 jab combo to hook. And I'm thinking about this, and I'm like, who do you reward? Do you reward the fighter? Here's the thing. What do you prefer? Someone punching you and hitting you throughout the entirety of 5 minutes, like constantly, over and over again. There wasn't a period in time where Volkanovski was giving Holloway some breathing room. He was really pressuring Max. But Max was able to land some really good-looking combos. That Volkanovski was able to defend. And now I tell you now, do you equate 3 really impressive jabs at the 1 minute, 2 minute, and 3 minute parts of the first round by Volkanovski? Do you equate that equal to Max Holloway pulling out a 3-punch combo at the 3 minute mark of the fight? Because the eye test is saying, well, Max Holloway, he's having the better exchanges here. And you know what? You can say, yeah, Holloway is having better exchanges throughout the fight. When both of these fighters were scrapping and they were fighting in close in the 50-50 exchanges, who was winning in the exchanges? Max Holloway. Who was winning in terms of cumulative strikes? Not the exchanges, but cumulative strikes going through the entire 5 rounds. Or going through all the entire 5 minutes or per round. It's Alexander Volkanovski. So, first time I saw that, Max won. Second time I saw it, I chose Volkanovski. Because I'm rewarding Volkanovski for his sheer volume throughout the entirety of the 5-minute fight here. And only that, people think like, oh my god, he got a knockdown on Alexander Volkanovski. Volkanovski stood right the back up. And then things went back to normal again. So yeah, it was a knockdown, but it wasn't as significant as people make it out to be here. And then let's look at the second round here. Second round. Max Holloway scored 22 of 55 strikes. So significant strikes. 40%. Alexander Volkanovski, 28 of 48. He landed 6 more shots while attempting 7 less strikes. Who won the second round? Twitter again pulls up. I remember watching that. I thought Holloway won it. It doesn't help the Michael Bisping. I looked up like other people's opinions and viewpoints on this, like the forums, Twitter, social media. I was looking up, hey, what do you think about the fight? And they all react very strangely when they're presented the stats. So Volkanovski statistically fought better. And this is way different from Cody Garbrandt versus Dominic Cruz, where it was very evident that Cody Garbrandt's significant strikes mattered more. Because when Cody Garbrandt, when he got a shot on Dominic Cruz's arm started flailing, and he obviously looked out of it. In the second round, yes, there was a knockdown yet again by Max Holloway with a right leg kick. But it wasn't as significant enough compared to Cody Garbrandt hitting a right hook on Dominic Cruz. Yes, you clocked him, he got down on one knee, but he immediately stood right to back up within just a second. So did that one knockdown mean more? Did it really mean more? So Volkanovski had 6 more strikes than Volkanovski had 6 more strikes than Max Holloway, but Holloway had a knockdown. And that's a tail of the tape in the second round here. First and second round. Who had the knockdowns? Holloway, twice. Who had better striking percentages? Volkanovski. Were the knockdowns enough to rate it over the striking percentage and sheer volume? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. But in that second round there, I picked Max Holloway. I chose him. I thought the combos and strings that was happening in the second round were much more impressive. I thought the showcase of Max Holloway in the second round was a lot more better in the first round. So I chose Max Holloway winning the second round, and people also chose second round also. Even though Volkanovski, he had the higher percentage. He landed 58% of his shots compared to Max Holloway's 40%. But when I look at the eye test, I just think Holloway. So I'm combining both right now. So I say Holloway won second round, Volkanovski won first round. Third round. Look at the third round here. This is tough. Because people were mentioning the third round was a deciding factor on whether or not Volkanovski or Holloway won the fights. Third round, Max Holloway landed 22 of 60 shots. Volkanovski landed 35 of 63 shots. He attempted 3 more shots, but landed 13 more of his shots. And it was by the third round that you can tell Max Holloway was starting to breathe a little bit more heavier. So I give Volkanovski the third round. Round 4. This is so strange. Max Holloway, 37-71. 52%. Volkanovski, 36-75. The numbers say Holloway got won in the striking exchanges. But Alexander Volkanovski won in the grappling exchanges, in the clinches. I felt like he had better control over Holloway did. So fourth round, that's so bizarre. Fourth round could go to Holloway. Fourth round could go Volkanovski. That's a complete toss-up. I generally don't know. But the fifth round, Volkanovski wins. Off the eye test. Even off ground control. But then, according to the stats, Holloway won the fifth round with 34-77. He just got him overall in terms of sheer volume of strikes and attempts. Only plus 3 in landed, but 16 in attempts. So one could argue, well, striking percentages, you score the points, you score the round towards Volkanovski. And then the decision happened. You hear Michael Bisping saying, "Oh man, I got Max Holloway winning 3-0." Like when he got into the fourth round, it was 3-0. Then Bisping thought according to Bisping, 4th and 5th round, Volkanovski won. Well, I say 2nd and 3rd round, that were Volkanovski, and 5th round, Volkanovski. I remember one of the cornermen for Holloway, he told Holloway, hey, the score is 2-2. And I judge it going 2-2. Well, a lot of people judge it 3-1 via Twitter and even on commentary. But the final result being Volkanovski was able to defeat Max Holloway by split decision, and everyone on Twitter, they went crazy. People say it got robbed. People are comparing this fight to Dominic Reyes and John Jones. And to an extent, I kind of agree, but also not really. I really don't. But okay. When I look at Reyes versus John Jones, that fight should have went towards Reyes. Reyes obviously, both the eye test and the numbers, say that Dominic Reyes won the first 3 rounds. But when you look at Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski, when you look at all 5 rounds, any of them could have won any round. Volkanovski, you could make the argument, won all 5 rounds. You can make the argument that Max Holloway won all 5 rounds. It is so up in the air that there's no way anyone could say, oh, this person obviously won the fight. And according to Dana White, according to media members, according to fight fans on social media, they all said Max Holloway got robbed. I don't really believe so. Max Holloway himself went on, he said, like, it's not right to go and harass people over the decision. It happened. It was a very close fight. It could have gone, honestly, either way. And there's a lot of flag going on towards a judge. One of the judges scored the fights going towards Volkanovski winning, but he's the same judge that also scored Jessica Andrade winning in her fight against Rose Namajunas. So that's very strange. I don't know if I agree with the person. I don't know if I agree or if I disagree. But when I look at Volkanovski versus Max Holloway, legitimately, this fight could have gone either way. I'm not gonna say Max Holloway got screwed. I don't think so. And when I look at the numbers again, Max Holloway landed 63% on headshots. Volkanovski landed 42%. But in the leg kicks, which were a lot of people either underrate or overrate, I have a tendency of overrating them. Volkanovski landed 47% compared to Max Holloway's 12%. And Max Holloway was limping by the end of the 3rd round. Could have gone either way. I personally choose Volkanovski winning that fight. I want to know what your opinion is. A lot of people say Max Holloway won. A lot of people say Volkanovski won. Feel free to message me via Instagram, Twitter, and or Facebook. I'll be looking at that right now because right now, that fight could have gone either way. There's a lot of harassment going on from both sides. What's going to happen with Volkanovski? What's going to go on with Max Holloway? I don't think there's going to be a title fight anytime soon between those two. Just because Dana White doesn't prefer a 3rd fight if a guy is already up 2-0. And so you're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast. Coming back right after the short break here, I'll be discussing the rest of UFC 251.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
And we are back. So we just discussed the main event and the co-main event being Kumaru Usman versus Jorge Masvidal for the welterweight title, and Alexander Volkanovski versus Max Holloway for the UFC featherweight title. One fight was very obvious. We all know Kumaru Usman won that fight. Now we're kind of iffy on who won the fight between Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski. Well, let's talk about these 2 other fights here, which are pretty definitive. We got Petyr Yan knocking out Jose Aldo. Even though Jose Aldo had a really good performance. He had a great performance for the first few rounds. Now, was it good enough for him to go win the fight? Not really. There were really brief instances where I was thinking, oh man, Jose Aldo, he can actually win this fight. But Petyr Yan was just a lot more better. He was a little bit more better in a per round basis in terms of his striking. But Jose Aldo, man, had a great fight. Without a doubt. This is Petyr Yan's biggest fight he's ever had. Not only because it's a title fight, but also it's the most challenging fight he's ever had. I've never seen anybody give Petyr Yan as much of a challenge as Jose Aldo. But it was in the 4th and 5th round that things really started to turn. While 1 through 3, it could have gone either way. I was personally saying that Petyr Yan won three of the first rounds. But honestly, it was so close it could have gone either way. I don't know what the judges were thinking. 4th and 5th round was all Petyr Yan. Jose Aldo threw out the best he could, 1 through 3 in those rounds. But next thing you know, Jose Aldo, by the end of the 4th round, I legitimately thought, okay, there's no way Jose Aldo could continue the fight here. But the referee kept pushing on. I didn't think Jose Aldo was in the right place by the end of the 4th round. 5th round happens. Jose Aldo is brought to the ground. Petyr Yan is just laying the ground and pound onto Jose Aldo. And then we have like Dana White saying, "Oh man, isn't it awful that Jose Aldo was like kept there too long?" But Petyr Yan was able to become the bantamweight champion with Henry Cejudo retiring. There's no bantamweight champion, and there's no other person out there who I believe should be, the champion than Petyr Yan. I expect right now it's gonna be Petyr Yan against Aljamain Sterling, like it should be. That's probably going to be the next matchup. We didn't know when that matchup was going to happen. But honestly, I personally give big praise towards Jose Aldo. I thought he would be completely smoked for the most part of this fight. But instead, he had a really good fight. He had a really good showing. 1 through 3, 4th and 5th, he just didn't have enough in the gas tank. And that led to Petyr Yan winning the fight. Women's strawweight bout, Jessica Andrade versus Rose Namajunas. I'm going to be honest with you. This is my fight of the night. This is my fight of the night, and I say performance of the night has to go towards either Kumaru Usman or Rose Namajunas. And the reason I'm saying that is because, Kumaru Usman, he fought exactly the right way, and he had a short amount of prep time to fight against somebody as good as Jorge Masvidal. Rose Namajunas, she's been gone for over a year. It's been 18 months? Year and a half? She's been gone for about a year and a half. And she's going against this destroyer in Jessica Andrade. Jessica Andrade has to be one of the strongest women in all the women's strawweight division. One of the strongest women out there. And now, Rose Namajunas, she's having a comeback. She has a comeback here. She's fighting against the woman who slammed and knocked her out for her title. There's a lot on the line here. Because winner of this fight, obviously, was going to fight against Weili Zhang. Or fight against Ioana Jędrzejczyk if she were to return later this year. So Jessica Andrade versus Rose Namajunas, the number one contender, will possibly fight against Weili Zhang. And in the first 2 rounds, it was all good. I was very scary for Rose Namajunas because she was throwing out these random flying knees that for the most part missed. And I thought to myself, why are you attempting those? Why? Why were you going for those? Those could have ended really poorly for you, because the problem with Rose Namajunas was that she kind of stepped away from the game plan of trying to turn this into a boxing match, and she's trying to press forward in the action. Jessica Andrade had amazing head movements. The way how Jessica Andrade fought against Rose Namajunas this time versus the first time, Jessica Andrade fought a lot more better. Jessica Andrade's performance here against Rose was much more better, even though she lost, which is strange. Even though she lost compared to the first round of the last fight. Because if you were to just dissect and in a vacuum look at the first round between Rose Namajunas and Jessica Andrade and their first fight, Rose Namajunas was smoking Andrade. Even for the most part in the second round, Rose Namajunas was smoking Jessica Andrade here. And now we come into the second fight. Rose Namajunas was able to go use her length and was able to go win out with the size difference between her and Jessica Andrade. Rose Namajunas, great boxing. Jessica Andrade had a really good head movement, but she wasn't able to consistently keep up with a head movement to prevent Rose Namajunas. It mostly looked like Rose Namajunas was picking apart Jessica Andrade, while Jessica Andrade was struggling trying to press forward the action, because Rose Namajunas, even though she's not moving as much as Andrade, had a really good head movement and was pretty much dodging everything Andrade gave to her. Andrade was able to land some really good clean punches here and there, but for the most part, Rose Namajunas was landing her shots here. I'm going to throw up the stats here. So for Namajunas against Jessica Andrade, for total strikes, it's actually very close here. Rose Namajunas landed 35% of her strikes, 82 out of 235. Compare that to Jessica Andrade's 37%. She striked 3% a lot more better. 79 out of 213. Now in terms of significant strikes, Rose Namajunas landed 34%, 35%, 82 of 235. Jessica Andrade 71 of 205. This was a very fast fight, very fast one. Jessica Andrade was able to go get 1 out of 3 takedowns going down, while Rose Namajunas only got, she got 0 of 1. She attempted 1, and nobody expected she would attempt 1, and even the commentary team was like, wow, Rose Namajunas attempted a takedown. Oh my goodness. So, Jessica Andrade, she did take advantage of Rose Namajunas, but there's only one round to which Jessica Andrade obviously won. Rose Namajunas won the first round and second round. Jessica Andrade won the third round. That's the general consensus. But the same judge that, strangely enough, I agree with in his judging of the Volkanovski fight versus Max Holloway, that same judge scored Jessica Andrade winning the fights in the second round. So, now I'm thinking here, alright, how did Jessica Andrade win the second round? And once again, this is very similar to Volkanovski versus Max Holloway and Cody Garbrandt versus Dominic Cruz. Who hit harder? Jessica Andrade. Jessica Andrade's significant strikes mattered more than Rose Namajunas'. Here's the thing, if this fight was a championship fight, 5 rounds, I would say Jessica Andrade would win. 5-round fight, Jessica Andrade was winning in the third round, and if it went one more round, Jessica Andrade would smoke Rose Namajunas in the 4th and 5th round. And the second round, Jessica Andrade was landing these really good clean shots onto Rose Namajunas, where Rose Namajunas' neck was cranking back. So I'm thinking about this. Well, what do you reward? Do you reward the fighter who won? Who do you reward? Do you reward the fighter who fought their best at the second round? Or do you reward the fighter because in brief instances in the second round had a huge upper hand and landed some really good shots? Who do you reward in that moment? One could argue that Jessica Andrade might have possibly won a 10-8 round on Rose Namajunas, but by the time Jessica Andrade was pulling at everything on Rose Namajunas, too much time has already passed. So, yeah, too much time has already passed, and Rose Namajunas was still defending herself. Even though Jessica Andrade, what I liked about this fight is that there were many occasions in this fight that a regular person, if Jessica Andrade was coming right at you, okay, this happened with Carla Esparza and Michelle Waterson, in that you have one fighter who's pressing the action, and unlike Michelle Waterson, Rose Namajunas didn't pedal back after a takedown attempt, or after a clinch attempt, or after diving in for like a 3-punch combo. No, she pressed forward. Like, she took 2 steps back, pressed forward, and then Jessica Andrade, at many moments in this fight, was able to go press back in her attempts. And I think because of that, that's the reason why it was hard to score Jessica Andrade winning the second round, or Jessica Andrade winning in the third round at 10-8. But really, it was a close fight. I believe in a championship setting, 5 rounds, Jessica Andrade would win the fight. But I'm very surprised and very impressed for how good Rose Namajunas performed after a 1.5-year layoff. She had a really nasty, left black eye, looked really nasty. Jessica Andrade looked a lot more better in the fight. I'm just saying, even though Jessica Andrade lost the fight, she looked really good. She looked really good against one of the best fighters in the entire world at Rose Namajunas. So I congratulate both women there. They both had really good showings. And maybe we might see Rose Namajunas versus Weili Zhang in the near future. Maybe sometime later this year. Possibly sometime middle of next year. And then we have Amanda Ribas versus Paige Van Zandt. Oh man. Okay, so let's talk about this fight here. Should this fight even be in the main card? I'm thinking about this. Paige Van Zandt, it's hard to understand why she's a big star. It really is. She looks like a star, and she's in a lot of good press media, and she's probably one of the more popular fighters here in the roster. But if you just look at Paige Van Zandt in her own standing within the UFC, why is she in the main card? I don't know. Other than the fact she's popular. So, Amanda Ribas, it's okay, bell rings. Amanda Ribas presses forward in the action on Paige Van Zandt. Ribas takes her down. Ribas goes for an armbar. Ribas wins. And I'll compare this. This fight lasted about 2.5 minutes. 2 minutes and 21 seconds in the first round. Amanda Ribas landed 13 out of 15 strikes. She landed 6 out of 7 significant strikes. Amanda Ribas needed 1 takedown. And then she got the armbar down. Paige Van Zandt. Paige Van Zandt landed 4 out of 6 strikes. 3 out of 5 significant strikes. I don't know, that's very strange because I don't really recognize that. Because right off the gate, Amanda Ribas completely stomped Paige Van Zandt here. So Amanda Ribas won the fight. If you look at the betting odds between Paige VanZant and Amanda Ribas, the betting odds were really, really high for Ribas to win that fight. It was painfully obvious that Paige VanZant just wasn't in the same league as Ribas. If you follow Ribas' social media and all her interviews, Ribas has very high expectations of herself in the division, and don't be surprised if by the end of next year, 2021, she's in a title fight, because she's honestly that dang good. But the story of this fight wasn't who's going to win this fight. The story of this fight was what's Paige VanZant going to do after this fight. Because we all know Amanda Ribas is going to win. All we're wondering right now is what should Paige VanZant do after the fight. And according to Dana White, he mentioned this because Paige VanZant, this is her last fight. This is her last fight in the UFC so far, at the very least. And so Paige VanZant, her idea coming into the fight, she kept talking about her contract. She wants to renew a contract. She doesn't care about winning. She doesn't care about losing. It's even in one of her interviews, she said herself, win, lose, doesn't really matter. I already know what I'm worth. So whatever happens, happens. So just off that, huge red flag on Paige VanZant. And then Dana White had a very interesting response here concerning Paige VanZant here, where he says, some announcer or media member, he asked, hey, what do you think of Paige VanZant? This is her last fight in the UFC, possibly. She could be renegotiating. Paige VanZant constantly talking about her being a free agent. White responded at the press conference saying, I like Paige. It's like Curtis Blades when Blades fought last. When you talk out all that stuff, I have not been paid enough and fighting inconsistently. One time in the last year, injuries, and then got smoked in the first round of the fight. She should definitely test free agency. So, from what I'm getting from Dana White saying, yeah, Paige, test free agency. Yeah, good on you. I'm not really sure if the UFC are fine offering Paige VanZant what she thinks she's worth. Because according to Paige VanZant, she says she makes a lot more money doing Instagram stuff and social media stuff, more than she does being a UFC fighter. And considering her current standing right now, and that it just hasn't really moved up at all, actually she's been digressing down since she signed her contract years ago, I don't think the UFC are going to pay her what she wants. So, Paige VanZant, it's very likely we could see her competing at one championship, competing at Bellator, meeting up with Chris Cyborg, but also Renee Young, who's one of the announcers for the WWE. She's out there vocalizing, hey, Paige VanZant, try the WWE. Try some fake pro wrestling here. And I thought to myself, wow, Paige VanZant would fit perfectly with the WWE. And it's like Paige VanZant, it's not like Paige VanZant in her interviews, unlike Amanda Ribas, who has these very high aspirations and expectations of herself to be one of the elite fighters in an organization. I don't think Paige VanZant really cares all that much about that. I think she cares mostly about more than anything else, especially if you listen to her interviews. She only cares about the money she's making and what she could potentially make being a free agent, what she could do being an actor, what she could do doing Instagram, what she can do being a model. She has aspirations and goals that go beyond just the octagon and beyond just winning the championship belt, because I haven't heard a single thing about Paige VanZant saying, hey, I want to win a belt. I've never heard that in the past 2 years at least, because her going through injuries and her losing. She's doing what she wants to do. She's doing what she thinks is best for her, and that's good on her. I'm happy for Amanda Ribas. She'll continue on in her dominance in the flyweight division, and I'm happy for Paige VanZant if she were to go get paid really high, the value that she believes she's worth at free agency. So good for them on both. And overall, UFC 251, very fun show, and I'm excited for the rest of Fight Island. This brings us to a close for today's podcast. You've been a great audience. All I gotta say is thank you. Thank you for listening to the GSMC MMA podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask you, please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts MMA Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmc.com. GSMCpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.